The 2013 NASCAR Sprint Cup Series season will be remembered for many things. The debut of the Generation 6 car, Danica Patrick being the first full-time female driver, Denny Hamlin v. Joey Logano, Matt Kenseth's first year at Joe Gibbs, Kevin Harvick announcing his split from RCR, Spingate, Tony Stewart's injury, and much more. But no matter what, the narrative would have changed without the chase, and the results may surprise you. So with that, let's break down the 2013 Sprint Cup season. In the first 6 races, there would be 5 different winners, with Jimmie Johnson winning his second Daytona 500 and then winning Martinsville 5 weeks later. Carl Edwards would conquer Phoenix, with Matt Kenseth winning at Las Vegas and Casey Kane winning the Bristol race, with Kyle Busch winning the chaotic race at Auto Club. After the first 6 races, Jimmie Johnson, who heartbreakingly lost the 2012 championship, was now looking for redemption, and he was now the points leader with finishes of 1st, 2nd, 6th, 22nd, 12th, and 1st. His rival from the previous year and defending champion Brad Keselowski would be in 2nd, 6 points back, with the top 7 drivers being within 1 race of each other. Over the next 6 races, Jimmie Johnson would continue his consistency and extend his points lead to 32 points over new 2nd place Carl Edwards, the 2008 and 2011 champion, who in both years outdueled Jimmie Johnson for the title. While these two were having consistent opening parts to their 2013 campaigns, defending champion Brad Keselowski would have a huge championship hangover.
Caution. Brad Keselowski hits the wall in turn 2.
Significant right front damage. Got a flat or something down the straightaway. All right, 10-4.
Lap 157. Keselowski was running 17th.
And you can see that right front tire is down, and that was the indication I had when I looked up. The car went straight to the wall.
And here we go. This was just a wad of cars, Darrell, and everybody trying to get where nobody could go.
I was hollering at Barry. I said, Barry, turn forward, turn forward. I don't like the looks of this.
13 way up high outside Paul Menard. And Kurt Busch trying to flash through with Keselowski.
They all kind of come together right here.
Oops.
Kurt Busch in that 78 is going to have a little bit of damage on the right side of his car. Look at Brad Keselowski in
Bunch
that
of damage in his car. Here comes the 55 of Mark Martin, who's several laps down.
In the wall in turn 3, Danica Patrick and Brad Keselowski.
Oh, more damage on the 2. Looked like the right front was locked up and took it right into the wall.
With 3 finishes outside the top 30, he would tumble down to 10th, 110 points behind Jimmie Johnson. The next race at Dover, Jimmie Johnson would be closing in on a win, but he would get the black flag, and with this mistake, he would finish 17th while Carl Edwards would finish 14th and would close the gap to 30 points. At Pocono, Jimmie Johnson would get redemption for the previous week by dominating and winning the race, while Carl Edwards would finish a mediocre 18th, stretching the gap to 51 points. At Michigan, it would seem like Jimmie Johnson was going to cruise to an easy 3rd place until he would make a crucial mistake.
If you can stay up front, to be a smooth landing. And around Jimmie Johnson in the wall, running 2nd. No caution yet. Here comes Kevin Harvick. That's for the runner-up position.
That's got to be a cut tire like that, like we saw on those other guys.
Left front flat.
Left front.
He would finish 28th while Edwards would come home 8th, cutting the gap to 31 points. At Sonoma, Edwards would finish 3rd while Johnson would come home 9th, closing the gap to 25 points. At Kentucky, Carl Edwards would finish a mediocre 21st. Jimmie Johnson, however, would almost lose a haul of points.
Again, the 48 does not get a good restart. He's going to lose a couple of spots here possibly.
Joey Logano,
and he's going to get sideways and wreck.
Yeah, he just cut down on the 22 car right there.
Jimmie Johnson able to save it?
Yes.
Barely.
Oh my gosh. He did a great job of but
he was sideways.
But he tried to block. He tried to block. Yeah. It looked like he tried to block that 22 car, and Joey was there. That was Joey's position.
Well, they got a bad restart, and those guys, they scattered on Jimmie, and you're right. He tried to salvage what, the bad restart he had, and he got himself spun out for it.
Yeah, that's what it looked like.
Even with that late spin, he would come back to finish 9th, stretching the gap to 38 points. At Daytona, Jimmie Johnson would dominate the race and win, but Carl Edwards would not have these fortunes.
Tony Stewart feeling good, and how about Kurt Busch in that outside lane with help from...
With the 29th place finish, he was now 3rd, 71 points behind, and Clint Bowyer would jump up to 2nd, 49 points behind. At New Hampshire, despite starting last, Johnson would finish in incredible 6th place, while Clint Bowyer would come home 13th, stretching the gap to 56 points. At the Brickyard 400, Jimmie Johnson would finish 2nd, while Clint Bowyer would finish a mediocre 20th, stretching the gap to 75 points. At Pocono, Clint Bowyer would finish 14th, while Johnson would come home 13th, slightly expanding the gap to 77 points. At Watkins Glen, Bowyer would come home 6th, while Johnson would finish 8th, closing the gap to 75 points. But at Michigan and Bristol, it would seem that Jimmie Johnson's consistency would come to an end.
As you can see, Jimmie Johnson has come down pit road. Jamie Little, what's going on?
Well, you see him on pit road. Rick Hendrick just walked by me and just shook his head, not exactly sure what's going on. I'm going to talk to Chad Knausch, you guys, and I'll let you know what Jimmie's saying. Can't hear anything on the radio at this point.
Back live at Bristol and back under the caution. Trouble in turns 3 and 4. David Ruderman, Eric Almirola, and Jimmie Johnson caught up in the aftermath. 15th, 16th, and 17th.
Yeah, I've been watching Ruderman struggle a little bit. He'd been running really well all night inside the top 15, but we saw him get sideways earlier, and off of 2, the 43, looked like he was all over the back of the 83. And I believe maybe they continued that contact down into turn 3, and then Jimmie Johnson just at the wrong place at the wrong time once again tonight.
Ryan Vickers
is a part of this.
Involved.
So my apologies to Almirola. He wasn't involved in that, but this is what we're kind of starting to expect here late.
With an engine failure at Michigan and a crash at Bristol, and Clint Bowyer having a 3rd and a 14th, he would close the gap all the way down to 18 points. But over the next 6 races, both Bowyer and Johnson would have their own inconsistencies.
Kansas Clint Bowyer might be glad that this is a holiday weekend, because if he wins this race, the party might go on for a while.
I just saw some smoke out of that 15 though, right there. Maybe Clint did know what he was talking about. Right there.
Yeah.
Oh, man.
All done. Caution is out.
Wow. Oh, that's too bad. He was running fast, some of the fastest laps on the racetrack right until then.
Leading the race. There. Caution flag is out. Things change again.
Wow.
You're rolling, man. You're rolling. You're rolling. You're rolling. Leader's right behind you. Leader's right behind you. Right behind you. Right behind you. You're all right. Ding, 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 ding. You're all right. You're legal. You're legal. You're legal. You're legal.
Had a little tap there, I believe, from Dale Jr. in the 88.
Wow.
With Bowyer having an engine failure at Atlanta, causing spin gate at Richmond, and getting slammed with a 50-point deduction. But since we don't have the chase in this timeline, we are going to rescind both Bowyer and Truex's 50-point penalties. As for Jimmie Johnson, he would have a crash at Atlanta, and at Richmond would lose the points lead to Carl Edwards by 1 point. Bowyer would be in 3rd, 13 points back. Harvick would also be brought into the conversation and was now 14 points back in 4th with 10 races to go. At Chicagoland, Harvick would finish 3rd, closing the gap to 11 points and was now 3rd, behind new leader Jimmie Johnson, who finished 5th. Bowyer would finish 9th and was now 4th, 17 points back. Kenseth would win the race, putting himself in contention, and is now only 26 points behind, and Kyle Busch also 26 points behind. Carl Edwards would lose the points lead with an 11th place finish and was now 2nd, 5 points back. At Loudon, Matt Kenseth would win and shrink the gap to just 19 points in 3rd. Carl Edwards would finish 9th and grow the gap to 11 points behind Johnson, who finished 4th. Kyle Busch would finish 2nd to close the gap to 26 points, while Clint Bowyer would come home 17th and Harvick 20th. At Dover, this would prove to be the turning point of the season, with Jimmie Johnson dominating the race and winning, and now having a massive gap to new 2nd place Matt Kenseth. In this race, Carl Edwards' season would fall apart.
That was Carl Edwards. Turning to the garage. Oh, Carl Edwards back on the racetrack after repairs to his car, 15 laps down, 35th place.
Clint Boyer would also fall out of contention due to a mediocre run. The next race at Kansas, Kevin Harvick would bounce back and win the race, while Johnson would come home 6th and Kenseth in 11th, while Kyle Busch's championship hopes would be dashed.
Trouble already.
Cars in the wall. Danica Patrick, David Rudiman, and more down on the grass. And Kyle Busch. Doesn't look like any damage to the 18 car, but might have spun down onto the apron, avoiding trouble. Oh, trouble! Kyle Busch and Juan Pablo Montoya.
Lock her down, 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 lock her down.
How did he get away with that?
I don't know.
Trouble! Kyle Busch into the wall.
Hold up. You're right.
Brian Vickers also involved.
Just fine and dandy.
That thing's destroyed in front.
The third place driver in the championship starting the day, who started at the back in a backup car at a track that has been his worst statistically in his career. And it is indeed another bad day in Kansas for Kyle.
After this race, it was down to 3. Jimmy Johnson was looking for his 3rd championship, while Harvick and Kenseth were both looking for their 2nd. And with 6 races to go, the title would have to be decided. At Charlotte, Kenseth would finish 3rd, while Johnson would come home 4th and slightly bring the gap down to 33 points, while Harvick would finish 6th and was now 32 points behind. After Talladega, with all 3 finishing outside the top 10, Johnson would extend his lead to 33 over Harvick, while Kenseth would now be 41 points back in 3rd. At Martinsville, Johnson would finish 5th, Harvick 6th, and Kenseth 2nd. And with that, Johnson would have 35 points over Harvick and 37 over Kenseth. But what no one was prepared for was the absolute stomping of the field the next week at Texas.
Matt Kenseth is going to finish 4th. Jimmy Johnson is going to lead 255 of 334 laps. Outstanding indeed. The winner at Texas, Jimmy Johnson.
With that, Johnson now had 40 points over both contenders and was now in prime position to take his 3rd championship. At the penultimate race in Phoenix, Jimmy Johnson would have a very solid day, finishing 3rd, while Harvick did all he could to stay in contention and won the race to now be 41 points back from Johnson. Kenseth would have a rough day, finishing 23rd and falling out of contention for his 2nd title. So with that race, the championship battle was set. Jimmy Johnson would have a very healthy point lead over Kevin Harvick, who is now a long shot in the title fight. If Jimmy Johnson finished 37th or better, he would win the 2013 championship. The drivers qualified 6th and 7th and would run in the top 10 for the majority of the day, and with Johnson going to finish the race in 9th and Harvick in 10th. But with Harvick leading a lap, they would ironically end up scoring the exact same amount of points, making Jimmy Johnson the 2013 champion. So either way, Jimmy Johnson would be the 2013 champion, but the season narrative would change a little bit. Carl Edwards and Clint Boyer would make a run at the title alongside Kyle Busch. Johnson would have a strong first half of the season, but would start to cool off a little bit in the latter half of the season. And then with contenders having their own inconsistencies, Jimmy Johnson would strive and take the crown away. Well, that'll do it for today, guys. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next week for 2014.